Hello and welcome to another iteration of Nerding Out with Nic Bodiford. I'm your host, Nic Bodiford. Today with me is the lovely Clark Barnes. Clark, how are you?
Looking cute, feeling cute. How are you, Nick?
Good. We have a double whammy as we are bringing the divisional deep dives, to a close this week. So we will be in an expedited manner. We will be breaking down the AFC South and the NFC North, kicking things off in the South with Clark's very own Houston Texans. So Texan season this year probably going to be pretty rough. Their schedule is really not. It's the defenses are not challenging, but the offenses are. I think that they're going to kind of get blown out. Their roster top to bottom is, I described them in the piece as junior varsity. And no one really knows what is going on with the quarterback position. While Watson is still being investigated, I guess the NFL can't interview him or something. So we have no idea even like what the league is thinking of this. I personally am not planning on Watson playing this season from a drafting perspective. So I think that it's going to be a battle between Tyrod Taylor, Davis Mills. Clark, it's my understanding that your boy, your man, Matt Waldman, is a big fan of Davis Mills. Do you have any thoughts and feelings on who is going to be quarterbacking the Texans this year?
Yeah, so I think that issues like this do a good job of showing how you and I approach things a lot differently. So I think the latest news, and I think the smart money is on Deshaun Watson not playing, but I tend to be a little more patient or wait. And so I will sometimes be late to react to things. But when nothing changes, I am often right. Inertia is incredibly powerful. I know that the story is that Deshaun Watson is not going to play, but he's not suspended. The NFL has had all summer to look into this, and whether these deadlines were created by beat reporters or, other sports reporters out there, Deshaun Watson has survived all of these deadlines, so these supposed deadlines. Mm-hmm. So he's the quarterback for the Texans. That might change, but right now he is. He's going as like the quarterback 20. I think he's drafted at 1206. So even if you do decide to draft Deshaun Watson, he is your second quarterback, probably in a 1 QB league. So free pick for a guy who, if he does start even on this terrible team, probably going to be a top 5 quarterback, I would say. Davis Mills and Tyrod Taylor. Tyrod Taylor is a serviceable quarterback. I know we kind of sometimes people laugh at his abilities because he's not the greatest, but he's fine. I would say that he's probably like the 20th, 22nd best quarterback in the league. And that's compliment. I think there's a lot of hidden value on this Texans roster. And after saying something positive about them, I'll correct you. I am no longer a Texans fan.
Okay.
I will only be abused as a fan for so long. And a team not being good is not being abused. But the ownership of this team has clearly showed they do not care at all about their fans. So go Packers.
Okay. For those interested, I have found a lot of insight in the thoughts and feelings of Drew Davenport. He's in the fantasy community, also a self-described criminal law expert. I believe he's an attorney. I've really enjoyed his insights on the Deshaun Watson case. So if anybody is interested in that, I recommend checking out Mr. Davenport's page. On to the non-quarterback positions. So as I mentioned earlier, I think that they're kind of going to get blown out pretty frequently. Normally we look to a team's passing prospects because, they get down, they're going to have to throw a lot. But what's interesting about this coaching staff, so Culley, head coach, David Culley, he was Baltimore's assistant head coach last year. We can kind of look at how they ran things, and they still continue to run at the NFL's fourth highest rate on second half early downs when trailing by 9 points or more. Their offensive coordinator, Tim Kelly, who's left over from the previous regime, I think he's offensive coordinator for the last 2 years. He's still offensive coordinator, and they kind of did the same thing that the Texans. They ran at the 12th highest rate when trailing by 9 or more points. So I think that like if there's one person that you might be able to squeeze some routine fantasy juice out of, it's going to be Phillip Lindsay. But I don't really have an issue passing on him at the end of the 9th round. He's RB 46. He'll probably beat that. But like if you don't want to attach yourself to this team that could go 0-17, I know that's hard, but they could do it. I get that. The only other name I'll throw out is big-bodied, athletically impressive receiver Nico Collins. Again, 9th round pick. You can throw a dart on him. I think he'll be the X receiver for this team at some point, but Brandon Cooks is there to absorb the target. So I'm not really interested in Clark. How about you? How about for non-quarterbacks on the Texans?
Yeah, so I don't think the Texans are going to be the worst team in the NFL. I think they're going to be bad, but the Jaguars still exist. So let's not speak in hyperbole, just because everybody's excited about that statuesque long-haired butte that they got down in Jacksonville now. Phillip Lindsay, I know there's not a lot of great analysis in this statement, but Phillip Lindsay is definitely the best running back on the roster. That doesn't mean that he's going to get all of the touches, but I've watched David Johnson play a lot. I've watched Phillip Lindsay play a lot, and Phillip Lindsay's better. Phillip Lindsay is weirdly smaller and a much better inside runner than David Johnson, a fact that seems, at least this preseason, totally lost on the Houston Texans coaching staff. So we're already seeing misuse out of these guys. But Phillip Lindsay in the 9th round, for someone who could see, if his body holds up, 260, 280 carries, and then maybe 30, 40 catches, I think in the 9th round for this, zero RB approach, that's a fantastic bet just because he's so cheap. And then Brandon Cooks is good. He's been good on a lot of different teams. He'll definitely, if he plays with Tyrod Taylor, it'll be the worst quarterback of his career. If he plays with Deshaun Watson, he's going to be a weekly top 20 rank. Brandon Cooks also going in the 9th round. That's just absolute. I don't think the Texans are going to be that bad. And even if they are, Brandon Cooks, really good at football, has been for years. As far as Nico Collins, Davis Mills, those are interesting names to keep in mind, but not while I don't think the Texans are going to be the worst team in the league, they're not going to be good enough to support auxiliary cast members.
Cool. All right, moving on to the Indianapolis Colts. Their schedule, again, we love to use the metrics of sharpfootballstats.com. Great stuff there. It's all for free. Their schedule faces up to be fairly strong offensive opponents, 3rd hardest slate of passing games, but very, very, very soft defense. The 2nd soft slate of pass defense, slate of pass defenses, 13th soft in the run defense department. Last year, they threw the ball on first half early downs at a rate of 54%. They were pretty much in line with the rest of the league. They did see a huge dip in their play action passing attempts. And I think that was because Phillip Rivers was there and he didn't like to throw play action. You can go look at the Chargers play action rate, and it was pretty low too. With Wentz there under center, I think that they're going to go back to that hyper efficient. I mean, no one's been able to stop play action yet. It's still far more effective than just pocket passing. So I think that if they do get down in games from these super talented passing offenses that they're going to face, they're still going to be able to get back in it, maybe a little bit more easily than Phillip Rivers just hiking it and hucking it. That doesn't mean that I'm terribly interested in Carson Wentz, because we just don't really know who this guy is at this point. Is he that MVP, or is he the guy who kind of had some locker room problems? I would say that I would be opportunistic with drafting Wentz if he were to fall. Clark, where are you on Wentz this year?
So while I think Wentz is going to be an upgrade overall, mainly because of the reasons you talked about, mainly because we've seen Frank Reich and Carson Wentz look really good together. That good year that Carson Wentz had was with Frank Reich. And Frank Reich is doing this thing that's unfortunately not done as often as I'd like to see from head coaches and offensive coordinators, is he seems to adapt his offense to the stars he has on his team, instead of insisting that his way of doing things is ultimately the best no matter what. So I'm not excited at all for Carson Wentz in a 1-quarterback league. Who cares? But I'm excited that Carson Wentz has replaced Phillip Rivers for all of the other players in Indianapolis.
I think that is a fair and reasonable take. Hat is on, but hat is metaphorically off to head coach Frank Reich. Before getting to the passing game, I want to touch on the big man in the room, Jonathan Taylor. So Taylor was obviously entered last year as the second coming of some great running back. I think he was most commonly comped to Ezekiel Elliott. People were kind of disappointed by the way that the early part of the season turned out. And then he got Marlon Mack ruptured his Achilles, and they got a terrific slate of god-awful defenses that he just pummeled through the rest of the season. Right now, he's being drafted, Taylor that is, at like the 1-2 turn with an average draft position of running back 10. I think that this team will give him ample opportunity to return that in the first half of games. If they start to get blown out, it is going to be a problem. And I'm going to touch on some of this stuff, but I recommend that everyone goes and checks out I Bleed Utilization. That's the episode title from the Fantasy Football Hustle. Dwayne McFarland and Brian Drake break down his usage like no one ever has before. The long and short of it is that he is really not used in the passing game. And that was even when he was getting some passing game looks. He played on something like 4% of their losing snaps, even when he was that like lead bell cow towards the end of the year. It just was not part of his wheelhouse. Now, I don't think that Marlon Mack is going to be anything this year, and some people do think he is. I think this is going to be much more Taylor and Hines, but Jordan Wilkins is still there. So for me, I think that you're drafting Jonathan Taylor at that 1-2 turn, sort of at the peak of what he might produce at. I'm okay with it, but I don't think that Taylor has the ceiling of this elite running back, like a top 3 guy that some folks think he does.
Yeah, so I agree with most of what you said there, but I'm going to come at it from a different angle. At the beginning of the run up to the season, Jonathan Taylor was easily slotted in as like the second, third, fourth running back off the board. And for the reasons that you outlined, I wasn't so hot on that. Mainly just Nyheim Hines is still there, and Frank Reich is smart and uses his players in a smart way. You got to get Nyheim Hines on the field at some point. Jonathan Taylor looked really good, though, when he took over last year. Granted, not against the greatest competition, but he played really well. He looked like he definitely belongs. He looks like he's definitely bell cow potential NFL running back going into his second season. At the 1-2 turn, I am ecstatic for Jonathan Taylor because I think that he's going to get all the work that he can handle. Marlon Mack is going to factor in because it's the modern NFL. Jordan Wilkins, that's going to be tough if he's even active when Taylor, Mack, and Nyheim Hines are all available. So I'm not really worried about that. I think I don't think 112 is his peak. I could see him squeezing into that RB5 or 6 if the Colts offense moves and if he gets a lot of touchdowns. And so I think getting him at the beginning of the second round, end of the first is fantastic.
Okay. And you kind of nailed it there talking about Hines. Like Nyheim Hines has turned into, I was really down on him at the beginning of his career, but the dude has turned into a rock solid passing game asset. Last year in PPR, half point PPR, and non-PPR, he finished between the running back 15 and running back 24. So even when he's not getting a single digit for catching passes, he still finished as technically a running back 2 last year. He's my running back 34. I'm hedging a little bit, but he's being drafted per FF Calc 10.12. Okay, so end of the 10th round as a running back 48. That is like auto draft territory for me at that point for him. How about you?
He finished as can be an important stat. I am trying to use that stat to inform where do I think this player is going to be ranked on a week-to-week basis once we get going in the season. And I think that Nyheim Hines, if things go how I think they're going to go for the Colts, which is relatively well, not top of the world, but on a decent functioning offense, I think Nyheim Hines is going to end up in that RB25, RB27 flex range and a lot more value in PPR. So yeah, sure. In the 10th round, you can take him, but there'll be several more guys that we talk about later that I would rather have as that 10th round pick. But any pick you want to make after like the 7th round, I'm never going to diss someone's 14th round pick.
Yeah, that's fair. Maybe I'll contradict myself when we're talking about those other guys. Moving on to the actual receivers. Michael Pittman Jr. is really the only one that I want out of this group. I think that Zach Pascal could do something, but I'm out on T.Y. Hilton. I would opportunistically take Paris Campbell. And in our tight end premium dynasty league, we did roll the dice on Mo Cox because he is fun as hell and is, has all the talent in the world, but it is a crowded tight end room. Pittman seems to be the guy that this team really believes in as the X receiver of the future. They drafted him, I think, in the second round last year. His dad was a longtime NFL player, and he had a lot of I am an adult man characteristics when he came out. And I think that was something that if you ever listen to Chris Ballard, general manager, talk about what they want to get right in their drafts, it's character. His biggest thing is I can find talent in anybody, but you have to get the character right. And he's bad at that. So the fact that Pittman kind of jumped out of the crowd at him as like a mature man was something they really liked. And he seems to be pretty good. He didn't have a wowing rookie year last year, but I think that he's going to be the guy. He's going at 9.07 wide receiver 40. I think that is a totally fine place to take him. I've got him again, wide receiver 35. Pittman is the other pass catcher for me.
So I'm a little bit on the opposite end of the spectrum here for you. I think Pittman, I think Pittman had a good rookie year for a second round wide receiver who was going to a team that was completely in flux and whose best wide receiver couldn't get on the same page with the quarterback and was kind of fighting nagging ankle injuries that have become a part of his career in T.Y. Hilton. I look at Michael Pittman in the 9th round, and my first thought is oh, that sounds great because Pittman could be the number one. It's going to be a new quarterback. And T.Y. Hilton is clearly, he's peaked. He could still have several years left, but I don't think that he's on the upswing anymore. But then I look at who else is available in the 9th round, and Pittman seems a little high for that projection. And then I turn around and I see T.Y. Hilton is going in the 14th round and think would I be super surprised if T.Y. Hilton had 1,100 yards and 7 touchdowns? No. And again, it's the 14th round, so I'm not going to diss anybody's pick there, but T.Y. Hilton in the 14th seems like a really good bet to make if you're just trying to add some, stability to your team. If you went with high volatility guys early, T.Y. Hilton might get you a few games while you try to figure out or find something on the waiver wire.
Okay. We're going to try to be mindful of time with this next team because I think that this one can get kind of fun. But Jacksonville Jaguars, their schedule shapes up to be a shootout. 9th hardest in terms of opposing passing offenses, 11th softest in terms of opposing passing defenses. Run games kind of a wash on both sides, of bad opposing run games and defenses in the middle of the road. We've got the debut of Urban Meyer, who apparently is walking around at practice with a bullhorn shouting at players. College tactics don't seem to work in the pros, but I guess these guys have to just learn that is not a good call. Some of the stuff he did, we'll get to other comments that Meyer has made, but I'm not optimistic on Meyer. I'm a little bit optimistic on offensive coordinator Darrell Bevel. Threw the ball at a 53% first half early down rate through the 25 games that he had a healthy Matthew Stafford over their 2 years in Detroit together. I think that something like this is going to be similar in Jacksonville this year. I think that it's going to be a deep A-dot passing game. Bevel likes to throw deep a lot. He works play action in there at a reasonable rate. I don't think that he uses it enough, but what we have, as you said, is the soft featured, beautiful, statuesque Trevor Lawrence. The guy's been, the prodigal son for a few years now. Prototypical size, 6'6", actually maybe a little bit on the light side, 213. But he was a great passer, and he was also a really effective red zone ball carrier over the last 2 years, 766 yards and 15 touchdowns. I think that he is the perfect blend of pass first, but can run kind of quarterback for today's NFL. Their offensive line is pretty solid. They lost their center, Brandon Linder, to a knee injury for a few games last year. And he's been the highest scoring guy on the team on the offensive line in PFF's database over the last 3 years. So obviously that was a pretty big mover and shaker. But anyway, Trevor Lawrence with this offensive line, the ability to throw deep, the opportunity to throw deep. I feel really good taking him at his 11th round, quarterback 14 ADP. He's my quarterback 15, but I think Lawrence might end up being my most owned guy as high-end quarterback 2 who has a shot to have a seriously strong fantasy season. Take it away, Clark.
I think I have Trevor Lawrence ranked as my 30th quarterback on the site. And that's not a knock against Trevor Lawrence. There too many smart people have seen this guy play in college, and they really do think that he is the real deal. And we'll see how that goes in the NFL for him. Your mention of how this new regime in Jacksonville seems to be working early in its transition into coming to power. It doesn't sound like it's going really well. And it isn't as though this coaching staff is coming to a long storied franchise that has a lot of stability elsewhere and won 6 games last year. This questionable coaching staff, a coaching staff who he didn't exactly say it's going to be hard now that everyone can pay their players, but he did say he's not used to everyone being as athletic as the guys on your team, right? So I just don't think this team's gonna be very good. And I know we love garbage time, but rookies in garbage time, a lot of times what happened to Joe Burrow happens to these guys instead of what we're hoping happened with Blake Bortles, right? So I am not confident about any of the Jaguars this year.
Yeah. So as an aside, this isn't an unplanned diatribe, and I knew that this was, going to be the case with this team. The nice thing is, though, they get to play the defenses of the Houston Texans and the Tennessee Titans twice a year, which can boost anybody's counting stats.
While you were going, I was like, the Texans aren't going to go 0-17. They get to play the Jaguars twice.
Yeah, that's fair.
I mean,
so.
But, in all honesty, that is a boost for Jonathan Taylor, Derrick Henry, these other guys, these other teams in this division. Is the Texans secondary is atrocious.
Yeah.
Their linebacking core is good, but they have no defensive line. So, yeah. Oof.
Yeah. Moving on to Lawrence's pass catchers. I've got Laviska Shenault and Marvin Jones Jr. as the wide receiver 32 and 36 respectively. I am really not high on DJ Chark, and it doesn't have a lot to do with Chark. I mean, I think that Chark can be a talented downfield guy, but he's only really done it 1 year. And Urban Meyer walked in and he said he evidently told listeners have heard this before, but he walked in and he told DJ Chark that you're a big guy and you're playing little, and he instructed him to gain weight. That's not promising from just a new coach finding his favorite players. So I've got Chark rated all the way down as the wide receiver 45. I know he's slated to be the number 1 by the drafting public, but he's not my guy. Shenault looks like, there's another guy I'll say this about, but he also kind of looks like the second coming of T.O., not to ruffle your feathers too much. The dude is just he's got a big body and he's a beast after the catch. What I like about Shenault too, one man's misfortune is another man's, whatever. Travis Etienne was drafted to be this slash player, right? This guy who played receiver and running back literally as a split role. That was what Shenault did in college. He was billed to do that in Jacksonville. Etienne's brought in, suffers the Liz Frank injury. Now he's out. Laviska, I think, was shaping up to be either the starting flanker, maybe the X, but also playing pass catching running back on, a third of his snaps. Sky's the limit for Shenault to me. Marvin Jones continues to be one of the best contested catch guys in the NFL. I was scrolling through all of his contested catch results over the last 4 years, and the dude's annually top 10 in contested catches hauled in, and he's formed a connection with Trevor Lawrence in the preseason. That's a dude who he just keeps looking to, and in practice too. So I like these guys a lot at their ADP. I think that they're so Chark's going in the 8th round, and then Shenault is early 9th, and then Jones is in the 12th. So give me give me those two at 1 and then 4 rounds later. How about you? Where are you at with these 3?
So I've got it Chark, Chenault and Jones, even though I don't think that that's their order for talent, just kind of the order for how I would like them to draft. I'm cooling mightily on this team for all of the things that I've said earlier. Chenault is probably the best bet, even though he's my second ranked guy. I'm really starting to lean away from bothering with any of these wide receivers.
Okay. That's fair. Guy we should bother with, though, James Robinson, my running back 14, last year's running back 7 in both half point and full point PPR. The dude's value was kicked in the pants when they drafted Travis Etienne to go gobble up all of his touches or all of his passing game touches, but that's not the case anymore. All that James Robinson has to do is be better than Carlos Hyde. Now, Carlos Hyde played for Urban Meyer in college, so that's a little bit of a red flag. I mean, I think that Hyde's going to get an irritating amount of touches, so I'm not saying that Robinson is going to match his running back 7 totals last year, but like as a high-end running back too, I think it'll be tough for him not to get 20 carries or 20 touches per game at least. So I like him a lot. So his current ADP is 4th round, running back 24. I think that's going to continue to climb. I would be drafting him all the way up. I can't believe I'm saying this, but around the round 2/3 turn. How about you, Clark?
Okay, so I've got him. I think that he's going to end up in the middle of the 3rd, and that's going to be well-deserved. Team's horrible. All that stuff still stands, but it was all true last year also, where Robinson just balled out. So I think even if things get worse, James Robinson is still a fantastic option in that zone of like pick 22-ish to like 30, 35.
Okay. Last note, I really like Colin Johnson. Hat tip to Jax, who participated in our mock drafts. He turned me on to the guy last year. He's 6'6". If any of these 3 receivers miss time, he'll step right in. He's not as talented as they are, but big guys and rookie QBs go well together. Any thoughts on any tight ends? Or are you good on this team?
Nope.
Okay. Tennessee Titans. Schedule overall is kind of middle of the road. As we've talked about, this division is not at all a strong one. The biggest news of the offseason with them is that their offensive coordinator of the last 2 years, Arthur Smith, who turned them into a play action machine, has left for warmer, other southern waters, Atlanta. Todd Downing, who was the offensive coordinator and maybe like assistant head coach for the Raiders in 2017, and then became the Tennessee Titans tight end coach, which is kind of funny because that's what Arthur Smith was doing before he took over as the offensive coordinator, has been promoted to OC for Tennessee. When Downing was with then Oakland, they threw it on 52% of first half early downs. That was around league average at the time. They used play action. I think it was, 3rd lowest in the league on 14% of their plays. That contrasts sharply with what Arthur Smith did last year, where they were throwing play action on 55% of their dropbacks. I think that given the success where like Vrabel was trying to get this team on track, and then they brought in Smith, or they promoted Smith, and he had this outrageous efficiency and with, just abusing play action. I would be stunned if Vrabel said, yeah, Todd, we'd like to promote you, and you can go ahead and drop our play action passing by 40%. I think that there's like 0% chance that that happens. Maybe they go below their preposterous over 50% of passes rate, but I still think that these guys are going to be like top 5 to 10% in play action passing in the league. As this pertains to the signal caller, Ryan Tannehill, who unfortunately was just put on the COVID reserve list, which was really interesting. I'm actually not really sure why. Adam Schefter announced that it was going to be a 5 to 10 day window, but Tannehill did say that he had begun the vaccination process in late July. So I'm not sure why he would be eligible for a mandatory 5-day suspension. I've spent way too much time reading through that 90-page PDF that they put out on their training camp rules, the NFL that is, and have not been able to get to the bottom of this. So maybe he's still not quite fully vaccinated, but yeah, everybody just keep an eye on Tannehill and see if that 5-day window is actually accurate. Regardless, what we saw with Tannehill once Arthur Smith came around was, one, his efficiency and his counting stats overall shot through the roof. Last year, threw the ball 481 times. That's only 18th most in the NFL, completed 315 passes for 3,800 yards, and a whopping, as I said, 33 touchdowns, tied for 7th in the league through 7 picks. One of the really cool things about this scheme, though, was it brought Ryan Tannehill from being a guy who only ever had like 100 or 200 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns max on the ground to having, I believe it was 6 and 7 respectively over the last 2 years. Something about this play action heavy passing game that when they get into the red zone, it creates these internal rushing lanes for the quarterback to just scramble. That may be more relevant for Matt Ryan. But I don't think that they're just going to abandon Arthur Smith's scheme. They'll try to replicate it to some degree. So I think Tannehill keeps some amount of red zone rushing. So for me, Ryan Tannehill is the running back, is the quarterback. I think I've got him as the quarterback 14. But I think that he's going to be one of these guys. Yeah, quarterback 14. I think I misread. Trevor's 15. Yeah, Trevor Lawrence 15. Ryan Tannehill is 14. I think he's one of these guys who's going to be a really high floor guy who has big spiked weeks. How about you? After that long-winded sentiment, Clark, where are you at on Ryan Tannehill?
Yeah, I think this is kind of the poster child of why I want leagues to move to 2 QB leagues, because it doesn't. Ryan Tannehill and like 20 other quarterbacks, or 10 other quarterbacks in this range for fantasy purposes don't matter. I think that I'm a little concerned that Arthur Smith has moved on to Atlanta, but maybe we're just seeing the tight end coach be the grooming spot for offensive coordinator. I don't know how you can see what Arthur Smith has done with very much the same personnel over the past 2 years and then want to change much of that. So this will be kind of an intelligence test for the new offensive coordinator of, do you continue to ride Derrick Henry? I don't know. There's no reason to take a chance on Ryan Tannehill, but he's going off the board as the QB 11. Sure, that's fine.
Okay. Moving on to the pass catching pieces. So there's a point. Yeah. AJ Brown at the beginning of this offseason was in contention for wide receiver 1 honors for me. The reasons for that were they lost number 2 receiver Corey Davis. They lost starting slot receiver Adam Humphries. They lost number 1 pass catching tight end Jonnu Smith. They lost rotational pass catching tight end Michael Pruitt. And then they also had Anthony Ferkser and Jeff Swaim unsigned at that point. They've since brought back Ferkser and Swaim, but they allowed 4 of their primary pass catchers to leave, at which point, expanding to the 17-game season, it seemed plausible that AJ Brown was a real life candidate for 200 targets. That excitement tempered a little bit after they brought in Julio Jones. I dropped Brown down to the wide receiver 5 behind the elite likes of Devontae Adams, Stephon Diggs, Tyreek Hill, and then Calvin Ridley. AJ Brown, he played 14 games last year and he had meniscal tears in both these. He got them repaired. There's one knee, I guess it was a little bit sore this training camp, but I'm still going back to the well with this guy. I could spend time reading all of his like raw stats and his advanced statistics, but this dude is an absolute beast. And I would be thrilled to get him in the, at his current, I think, 2nd round ADP. How about you, Clark? Anything else to add on AJ Brown?
No, just middle of the 2nd, absolute. Yep, I'll take him. Him, Calvin Ridley, and DK Metcalf, all just right there with each other.
Cool. Julio Jones last year. So the getting in the weeds here, it's stuff worth mentioning. Last year, with a minimum of 50 targets, AJ Brown produced 2.65 yards per route run, predictive stat of wide receiver talent. That was 4th best in the NFL. Julio Jones played 8 games, met that 50 catch or 50 target threshold. He was at 2.60. He was 5th best in yards per route run last year. The old man can still do it. He's just got a long history of hamstring issues. The big problem with that specifically is he's already got some sort of leg injury. We don't know what it is. It kept him out of the preseason so far. He's been able to get back to practice somewhat, but I was very fortunate. I got to have a brief exchange with Dr. Jesse Morse of the fantasy football, or the fantasy doctors. I highly recommend checking out what they have to say. Again, Dr. Jesse Morse. He, through one of his doctor connections, he treats a lot of NFL players. He couldn't reveal who because of HIPAA, but he was able to share the Titans hamstring protocols, in his opinion, are, he phrased it something like, they are bad for any team, much less an NFL team. Specifically for Julio Jones, this brings a little bit of extra worry. I have Julio as my wide receiver 17, but anyone who drafts him needs to understand that he's kind of in a uniquely bad place for this certain type of soft tissue injury, at which point he's now predisposed to have. If he is in, it is AJ Brown and Julio Jones and sometimes Anthony Firkser who are catching passes. That's it. So like, if he plays 14 games, he's getting like 140 targets and we're stacking cash. But if not, it could be a little bit of a problem. How are you treating Julio at his current 4.06 wide receiver 15 ADP?
Yeah, so I don't think at 406 that it's a bad shot. I think we're getting a lot of the injury concern baked into that, with the fact that when Julio played last year, still looked like one of the most dominant wide receivers in the league. There's some other guys I like better in that area. We've got Mark Andrews going about a round and a half later, who I'd rather have it than 406, Amari Cooper, things like that. But if things break poorly in the draft and I have to rely on Julio Jones as my starting number 2 wide receiver for the year, I can live with that.
Okay. Moving on to Derrick Henry, my running back 2, last year's running back 2. Dude went over 2,000 yards just rushing, 2,141 total, 17 touchdowns. He saw perhaps a troubling 397 touches last year. He's not quite at the mark where I'm going to be worried about that. If he sees another like 375 this year, then I'm probably going to back off of him a little bit next year, just because that is a lot of wear and tear on the body. But the dude's only missed 2 games due to injury in his 5-year career. I am happily drafting him at his RB3 1.04 ADP. How about you, Clark?
Yep. Absolute monster. Don't care about pass catching. He's fine.
Love it.
I mean, I care about pass catching. I don't care about his not catching passes.
Yeah. And he takes the Jaguars to town whenever he plays them. It's like 150 yards in the bag. Do you have any thoughts on Josh Reynolds or Anthony Firkser?
No.
Okay. Moving on to the NFC North. So Chicago Bears, their schedule is pretty friggin' hard. This is a tough team for me. The only person, I'm kind of just doing an all-encompassing one here because we'd have a lot more to say if we knew that Justin Fields was going to be the week 1 starter, but he's not. It's Andy Dalton, and Andy Dalton's a terrible quarterback. I'm not worried about Allen Robinson because Allen Robinson has only ever played with terrible quarterbacks with Blake Bortles and Mitchell Trubisky. So Robinson is my wide receiver 9, and I'm not concerned about that at all. Outside of that, though, I mean, it's going to take pass catching wise, it's going to take Justin Fields coming in for me to want to start Darnell Mooney. It's going to take Justin Fields coming in for me to want to start Cole Kmet. On the ground, David Montgomery was like a top 5 running back last year. He was an absolute beast. He saw both work on the ground and in the air. A lot of the air work was because Tariq Cohen tore his ACL and he's having a terrible recovery. He's not coming back. But in the offseason, the team went out and they signed Damian Williams, who he like single-handedly won the Super Bowl for the Chiefs in 2019. This dude is a capable, at one point, starting running back. He's only 2 years removed from that. I think Montgomery's still going to get a lot of work, but I think that Damian Williams is going to eat into it a lot. So I've got Montgomery as the running back 18 and Damian Williams as a running back 38. You can take Montgomery at his 3rd round ADP, but personally, I'm probably taking a receiver there, and I'm drafting Damian Williams at 1407, running back 62. How are you handling this team?
Yeah, so I'm fine with James Robinson or Allen Robinson at 311, about where he's going, end of the 3rd round. I think that's a fantastic place to get him, regardless of who plays quarterback. I'll echo your sentiment on not interested in any of the other pass catchers right now. We'll keep an eye on it, but for drafting purposes, no one to speak of. David Montgomery at the end of the 3rd is going to be a fine, waiting on running back option because he did look good last year. You'll hear a lot of people mention the close of the year where he really, really blew teams up. But before that, he was putting up really good yardage. It's just that he's going to be on a bad team. His handcuff, as you mentioned, is free. I'm not a huge fan of handcuffing, and this is one of the situations that I wouldn't necessarily want to handcuff, because why handcuff a running back on a bad team? But I think Montgomery could work in certain strategies, and his ADP is fair.
Okay. All right, then moving on to the Detroit Lions. Lions kind of up in the air schedule. I don't think it matters because these coaches are so bad. Dan Campbell looks, I just speaking super bluntly, and I'm sorry, he looks like a complete idiot. I don't think he knows what he's doing. He's the guy who wants to bite ankles. And then they got Anthony Lynn in there as the offensive coordinator, who we know is a complete idiot. Their quarterback is Jared Goff. Like, the only way I'm drafting him is in best ball with like my last 2 picks, and I'm taking one of his pass catchers and trying to get like 2 weeks of spiked production. The guys that I am interested in are the running backs. This is an old school mindset team. They're going to want to be a bruising team. Deandre Swift is my running back 25. Jamal Williams, my running back 29. Swift is they're both talented dual threat guys. Swift is very quick. Jamal Williams is not very quick, but DeAndre Swift is dealing with a light groin injury. Initially, we weren't really too worried about this, but it does seem like he might not be available in week 1, in which case Jamal Williams is probably getting like the running back 13 ranking, because this dude, they are going to give him 25 touches. When they're both healthy, I think that 16 to 18 touches for Swift is reasonable, with a lot of that coming through the passing game. Williams basically just, 2 or 3 fewer touches in each category, but I think that both of these guys are going to be heavily featured. Swift's 3.09 running back 19 ADP is too rich for me. Jamal Williams, meanwhile, can be had. I don't have that ADP in front of me, but like rounds upon rounds later. Are you interested in either of these guys?
So Swift's value has come down a lot, I think, as people realized how bad the Lions were going to be. At 309, when you look just at the running backs that are remaining, so you've got Darrell Henderson right around there, Miles Sanders, James Robinson, and Mike Davis. I would probably rather have all of those guys over DeAndre Swift, but taking Swift as my second running back or first running back in a strategy where I'm waiting on running back, that's fine, because this team is going to be probably so meathead run that they're just going to run and run and run. Really, though, the only interest I have on this team at all is TJ Hawkinson, and I still think you should be drafting a different tight end earlier, but if I get stuck with him in the 5th round, that's okay too.
Yeah, Hawkinson's a guy who might be able to get it done on volume and talent. He's not going to be done any favors by, catching Jared Goff balls, but the guy does look like one of those like extremely talented dual threat, real deal tight ends. I don't have anybody else that I want to talk about on the Lions. Is there anyone that's caught your eye?
Nope.
Okay. Green Bay Packers, pretty much a so-so. Well, okay, I shouldn't say that. Their schedule doesn't matter all that much because they have Aaron Rodgers. They do have some of the extremes. 10th hardest slate of passing defenses, fifth best slate of opponent run games, 6th best opposing front sevens. So, they're not going to be like facing pushovers, but the whichever LaFleur this is, he kind of pulled his head out and got Aaron Rodgers on board with passing play action or throwing play action last year. They totaled the 8th highest play action attempts. They threw the ball on a league average 55% of first half early downs. That's what you need to do to win in the NFL, and they got Aaron Rodgers doing it. So long story short, I feel totally fine taking Aaron Rodgers in the 6th round. I could look at him as like the 5.12 if I were to have taken Devontae Adams and I want to stack. Same thing with Devontae Adams. He's a 1st round pick for me. I would consider taking him at the 5th overall spot. How are you on Rodgers and Adams?
So I think Adams is kind of unquestionable number 1 wide receiver, not just because he did it last year, but such a stable situation. It's not like he's getting old, no reason that it couldn't happen again, other than it's just super rare for that to happen, which I understand. Aaron Rodgers and Russell Wilson are 2 of the best quarterback values, or just values, I think, at all. Rodgers, like you said, going in the middle of the 6th round. That I think we're in for Aaron Rodgers Revenge Tour, 2.0 before he forces a trade to another team. So I'm probably going to end up with Aaron Rodgers and Russell Wilson as my QB in most 1 quarterback leagues this year.
Okay. Looking at the ancillary pass catchers. So we have always had these flashes from Marquez Valdez-Scantling where he will take 2 catches for 60 yards and a score. Alan Lazard has seemed like a fine number 2 possession receiver, but they drafted Amari Rodgers to operate as like what was supposed to be Randall Cobb, and then Aaron Rodgers forced them to trade for Randall Cobb. Just, I think it's like a total FU to show them that he is running the show in Green Bay. They've also got Equanimeous St. Brown, who is rumored to be having a good training camp. I think that there are simultaneously too many receivers in this room for anybody to really pop reliably. And none of them are all that good. I don't personally have interest in taking these guys in managed leagues, maybe MVS in best ball. But the one that I do, the one pass catcher that I do have big time interest in is their tight end, Robert Tonyan. His tight end, or excuse me, his touchdown rate was like abnormally high. He probably won't match it last year, but when you get these receivers who form bonds with guys who just like in certain areas of the field, they look to them like Russell Wilson does with tight ends in the red zone, you can kind of bank on that. So Tonyan is a guy who I would feel okay having as my tight end 1. I think that I've got him, let's see here, as the tight end 8 on the season. How about you? Where are you on the non-Adams pass catchers?
So I think you nailed it with all the wide receivers. They're guys who, when your team has been struck with injury or you're on a bye week and you need to fill in, they're not a bad shot to take, because on any given week, any of these guys could have, 4 catches, 120 yards, 2 touchdowns. I just don't think that any of them are going to do it reliably enough to think like, oh, this is a good wide receiver 3 play for me this week. Tonyan, I am all about drafting a tight end early so that you get one of the big 3. Travis Kelce, George Kittle, or Darren Waller. But if that plan goes horribly wrong and you end up getting Robert Tonyan, he scored 11 touchdowns last year. You mentioned it might be hard to replicate that, but the Packers scored the most points in the league last year, and they may do it again this year. So he still has tremendous upside, 4 touchdowns in the red zone. And yeah, he's going as the tight end 9 or 11, something like that. So I think that that's a fair price.
Cool. In terms of the backfield, we now have a Jamal Williams less Aaron Jones. How high are you looking at drafting Aaron Jones?
So Jones is my RB5. I think people are kind of sleeping on him. Gets a lot of passing down work. He's an extremely electric back. He's not the biggest guy in the world, and he has had some injuries, but he's in the group of backs that I'm drafting before I draft Travis Kelce at like 107. I do think that A.J. Dillon is being forgotten about a little prematurely. We did see the Packers run out 2 running backs, frequently, even when Aaron Jones was healthy last year. So I really like the idea of, if I'm in the middle of the first, getting Aaron Jones, but then wasting, air quotes, the roster spot on A.J. Dillon, who could still have some standalone value like Jamal Williams did occasionally last year.
Okay. Yeah. It is interesting to try to figure out what is going on in the number 2 running back spot. Is it just going to be like a committee with Dillon, Dexter Williams, or Kylan Hill? Dillon. So I echo your sentiment. I think that Jones is like in the next tier of running back 1s behind the elite guys who could have a chance to get up there. I think his passing game role gets a little bit inflated when Devontae Adams has missed time, and I don't know that people take that into account when they look at their overall, his overall counting stats. But Dillon is tough for me. He's going as the running back 35 towards the end of the 7th round, and that's an area where you can get guys like Gus Edwards, who is guaranteed to have a high volume number 2 back role, or Zach Moss, who is the number 1 running back on his team. So I don't think that I'm going to end up with a lot of A.J. Dillon. But maybe that'll be my loss. Any other?
End of the 7th is a little earlier than I thought he was going. It is tough. If he fell a little bit to like the middle of the 8th, and I know we're splitting hairs, I'd like it. I would just like to get Juju Smith-Schuster and Robbie Anderson basically above him, and then I'd be willing to shore up my Aaron Jones pick with him. I wouldn't pick A.J. Dillon just for his own like standalone value.
Okay. All right. Final team of the NFC North, Minnesota Vikings. So we have one more generation of the Kubiaks, like Carl or Greg or something. Some Kubiak is now again Mike Zimmer's offensive coordinator. I think we all know what kind of scheme they're going to run. A lot of running the ball. No matter if they're losing, I think that they were they ran the ball like 7th highest in the NFL, even when losing by 9 points or more last year, and very little play action. So what this leaves us with is a fantasy limited Kirk Cousins. He's still going to have an incredibly high floor because he is throwing to 2 of the best receivers in the game, but his ceilings can be a little bit hard to come by. Kirk Cousins is my quarterback 9. I think that he's fine in 2 QB leagues, but he's not someone that I'm hoping to have as my starter for the season. That said, I think that they do have kind of a sneaky schedule that you could, if you wanted to draft Kirk Cousins and then go like get Trey Lance or Justin Fields and kind of wait those guys out, you could start the year with Kirk Cousins. Their season for the first few weeks: Cincinnati, Arizona, Seattle, Cleveland, Detroit, Carolina, and then the bye. And then they come back with Dallas. After that, you don't want to mess with them. But like outside of Cleveland, you got 5 games there of defenses that Kirk Cousins could actually kind of pummel. Where are you at on Kirk Cousins?
Yeah, Cousins is fine. I'm probably not going to take a shot on him just because his ceiling is so low, but I think he's best used, as you described, as kind of the lead quarterback in a committee if you're going to take a shot on one of these younger rushing quarterbacks.
Okay. As far as the pass catchers go, the 2 names to know are sophomore receiver Justin Jefferson, who had maybe the best rookie campaign of all time, finished 2nd in the league in yards per route run, and Adam Thielen, who the NFL fans seem to have forgotten about, even though he still scored 14 touchdowns last year. I think that Justin Jefferson may be able to replicate, and I'm sorry, the fire engine that's cruising past is showing up at an inopportune time. I think that Justin Jefferson can replicate the raw accounting stats that he put up last year. I think he could even best them. I have him as my wide receiver elite number. Sorry, I'm pulling up the rankings as I'm doing this here. Wide receiver 8, and I have Adam Thielen a little bit further down as the wide receiver 28. What do you think these 2 guys can do this year, Clark? How high are you on each one of them?
I think they're both excellent, and they're just capped by playing on a team who's going to lean on the running back to get most of the production done. Now, the passing tree is very narrow in Minnesota, but I have Jefferson as my wide receiver 12, which is apparently like criminally low compared to where other people have him. I don't think that's low. I think wide receiver 12 is super high. Thielen's at 503. I'm saying I thought that he was the forgotten man, and then I saw his ADP, and I'm like, I feel like you're getting a bit of a discount because of his injury last year, but 503 feels fine. I would be happy with Adam Thielen as my 3rd wide receiver. That's how I would look at that. Both these guys can play. I don't think they're going to, air quotes, cannibalize each other, because I think even bad offenses throw for 4,000 yards and, 25 touchdowns. And that could almost exclusively go to these 2 guys. So I think I'm a little lower on Jefferson just because it's his 2nd year. Don't hate the guy. I thought 12 was high, I swear. But yeah, both these wide receivers are fine. I'm just not getting super hot and bothered about either one of them, though.
Okay. Yeah. Jefferson right now going as the final pick in the 2nd round. I would, if so he's going final pick at the 2nd round, and AJ Brown is going number 1 in the 3rd. Were I to start Christian McCaffrey at the 101 and then come back and get Justin Jefferson and AJ Brown, I would be ecstatic. Regarding the other pass catchers, it's Irv Smith Jr. And then there's been some talk of Tyler Conklin, the 2 tight ends. I mean, I don't want to spend any time talking about Chad Beebe or D.D. Westbrook. I don't think anything's happening with those 2. Conklin, not fantasy relevant. Irv Smith, some are in. I am out. I just don't see enough targets going to this guy. And like, it's not, it will be, I guess it'll be an efficient offense, but they're not going to score a ton. I don't know. Smith is a tough pill for me to swallow. How about you?
Smith looks like an amazing athlete, and he looks like he's going to be a tremendous tight end. But No, you need to take a tight end early or take my boy Gerald Everett late.
Right. So with that, the fire engines are back, but actually, I'll pass on the injury jokes here to be made. This is a guy who I don't think either one of us are going to be drafting. Dalvin Cook currently going as the 1.03 on average, but generally speaking, second pick in half point PPR formats as a running back 2 behind Christian McCaffrey. Dalvin Cook. So we're way lower than the rest of the site. The rest of the site, I think, has him as that like running back 2. Yeah, Patty does, and no, Clark. Yeah, you're with me as having him a little bit later. I have Dalvin Cook as a running back 8. You've got him as a running back 8. Oh, okay, Pete's got him as a running back 6. Basically, Dalvin Cook can produce like Christian McCaffrey can, but he has dislocated his shoulders a total of 3 times. Once one does that, they are at a 42% elevated risk of doing that again for the next 2 years. His most recent one was in 2019. He is still not out of the woods. The big problem with this is that once that dislocation happens, inside of that 2-year mark, for the next 3 weeks, that rate is even higher. So for me, I don't want to have my first round pick risk being out for like 6 weeks because of something that was sort of predictable. If I'm volume drafting, yeah, I'll take him half the time. But if not, if this is like a couple of leagues that I'm in, he's not going to be the guy who I invest heavily in. A lot of this information I'm giving you guys is from the fantastic work of Dr. Edwin Porras of fantasypoints.com. Clark, I know you have stuff you want to say about Cook too. I hope I didn't steal anything or everything there. Please give me your thoughts.
No, that's it. You summed it up really well. And we've been following Dr. Edwin Porras, both, and you've brought him to my attention. And I think if you had to bet who is the running back who has the best chance to mimic what Christian McCaffrey does each and every Sunday, I think Dalvin Cook is that guy, just because he's so tremendously athletic. But the risk factor for him missing a couple of games just makes me uncomfortable with him at the 102, 103, 104. I've got him at the 108, which means I'll just not have him on any of my teams, and I get it, and that's fine. I won't talk anyone out of it, but again, with the likelihood of this injury to recur, it's gotten under my skin and makes me uncomfortable with it. So yeah, I'll probably just miss out on Dalvin Cook's league winning season this year.
Generally, I advise against drafting handcuffs because it commits 2 roster spots to one person's ability to produce. And that's not a way you don't want to be drafting in case you're wrong. You want to draft because you're right. And so like drafting Dalvin Cook and Tony Pollard is a really great strategy because you're now committing another roster spot to someone else's ability to become a running back 1. If Ezekiel Elliott gets hurt, you now have 2 running back 1s. If Dalvin Cook gets hurt, then you have Alexander Mattison. That's great, but now you're still burning that other roster spot on Cook. I might still do it just because if I end up with him like he is at that elevated risk, but it's not an optimal strategy. I get it if you do it. I'm super wishy-washy on whether or not I would take him. If I did not draft Dalvin Cook, I would totally take Alexander Mattison though, because you want that. You want the opportunities deep on your bench when you're trying to find these guys that can become these week winning players. That's what you want down there. You don't want the dude who can catch 5 balls for 40 yards. You want the guy who can break the slate. So if you did not draft Dalvin Cook, absolutely draft Alexander Mattison. And then if you did draft Dalvin Cook, maybe draft him too. Clark, any more thoughts on this backfield?
None.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I appreciate everybody listening. Clark, thank you so much for coming on for this. This was a blast. I could not have done this series without you. We will be back next week with some other fun stuff. Stay tuned, everyone.